Hi, welcome back to my channel and my review for Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. And this is the brand new movie in the franchise, and it's acting as a sequel to the trilogy of movies we had, which concluded a few years ago now with War for Planet of the Apes. And I was slightly sceptical about them coming back with a sequel just because I loved the way that trilogy concluded with its story. The arc for Caesar, I think, was beautifully wrapped up. And I didn't want them to come straight back and go over old ground again and tackle the same issues that those movies did. I wanted them to, if anything, reboot it and do something completely new. But I actually really like what they've done here. They've got a situation where this is set hundreds and hundreds of years into the future, where civilization is completely different now for the apes and the humans. So you have the apes that are now living in these separate clans. They all live with these different ideologies. You have the humans who are basically feral now. They live as scavengers. And it just creates an interesting new dynamic, new conflicts that we haven't seen previously tackled in the franchise beforehand. So I really liked the new direction they decided to go with here. And the plot here is following this young ape called Noah, who lives in this very confined community village. And one day when a particularly bad event takes place there, he's forced out into the world and has to go on this journey where he questions a lot of things about the way he's been brought up and has to come to terms with the new world that he's living in. So it's an interesting new direction to go for the story. And whilst I like the new direction, something I did think was interesting here, an element they put in, was Caesar is now considered a legend among the ape communities. You know, looking back at his philosophies of how to live, people look back at him as almost like a spiritual leader, and his teachings have lived on through the years, and you get all these different interpretations, and some of his words have been twisted over the years, where some people talk about the coexistence of human and ape, and you've got others who just believe about strength of apes working together and it's all about dominance. So it's quite interesting to see that that idea brought in here and still have the spirit of Caesar living throughout this story, even though we are brought into this new world of characters. So that was something I liked to show us, that we are still living within the world that was set up back in that trilogy. Overall, I really liked this film, and I think it's a great new addition to the Planet of the Apes franchise. I think especially if you enjoyed the past trilogy, you'll have a really good time with this one. It's definitely done the groundwork and set us up for potential sequels to flesh out the story even further, because the movie concludes on quite an interesting note. So I really like this first entry into this new era of Planet of the Apes. I will say though, it's not a movie that grabbed me straight away. I think the first maybe 25 or 30 minutes or so, it's a fairly slow burn start. And it sets up a fairly generic story where you've got this kind of innocent ape looking out of the world, going on a journey, wants to do right by his father, all this kind of stuff. And I was worried it was going to be a slightly more family-friendly, generic story setup than we're used to seeing with the previous Planet of the Apes films. But as I say, once it hits that 30-minute mark, it gets way more interesting. Once it starts to set up the conflicts and where the story direction is going, and once it introduces this new human character of May, that's where things for me started to really pull me in and really grip me and get me engaged with this story. I think May in particular is a great new character just because she's very complex, she's intriguing, you never really know what she's up to. You know, her intentions are always a little bit of a question mark, even all the way up to the end of the film. So I kind of like that element where she's following along with Noah on this story, and she's kind of doing it with her own motivations in mind. And she gets you kind of asking questions and thinking about certain things, and you're not entirely sure how to feel about the character, and that's something I really appreciated. And I think as well, when you get to the kingdom and you get the conflict where you get this new villain and what they're trying to do. I'm not going to go into spoilers here, by the way. I will keep it very light on story details. I know it's still a very new movie. But I think at that point when you arrive there, things start to get really exciting and pull you in, and I really enjoyed the movie from there. They didn't go quite as deep with the themes, I don't think, here as I would have liked them to. It's something that makes the original film just so fascinating to me. You know, all of the social commentary, the themes, the philosophy, all the ideas that are floating around that movie just really engage me. It gets me thinking. It makes me really want to discuss the film, and it's what makes it such an interesting film, I think. And I would have liked this movie to go a little bit deeper with some of those bits. It does in some senses, but not as much as I would have liked it to. But I did like some of the themes it was delving into here, especially when it goes back to thinking about Caesar's philosophy of, you know, the peaceful coexistence of he wanted of humans and apes. And you get to see this new perspective here where that may never be possible, where, you know, there's no objective right and wrong. It's just the case that if you're an ape, you need to do what's right by the apes, and if you're a human, you need to do right by the humans, and neither side wants to roll over, and if they can't coexist, one has to be the dominant species. So I kind of like that, because it also means you don't get these over-the-top villains where there's a clear right and wrong. I like it where it's a little bit more, you know, shade of grey, where you kind of understand the intentions of all the different characters here, whether it be this new villain of Proximus, or whether it's May, or whether it's Noah. All these different perspectives, and you understand where all the characters are coming from, even if you might not agree with some of the way they are making decisions. But I think they dealt with a number of things in quite an interesting way here. As you've probably seen already from the trailers, the effects work and all of the setting and the world they've built here is just absolutely stunning to look at. It's quite incredible what they can do with technology now, especially in terms of the CGI on the apes. Everything just looks completely convincing, so real. They bring so much character to each of the apes. They're able to get up and close with them and show all of these, you know, incredible action sequences, all this different stuff. And it looks completely authentic. I absolutely loved the effects work. It's literally flawless. I don't think I saw anything off with it at all. I really loved that. No weird moments that kind of take you out of it. Nothing like that at all. And just in terms of the world and the setting, I love how apocalyptic everything feels. You know, it does feel like you really are living way forward into the future, where civilization is nothing like it used to be. And I think that's amazing, especially when they're walking along the beaches and you can see how overgrown everything is. It just really brings you and immerses you into this world, just with how authentic and real everything feels. I do really appreciate as well here the dark undercurrent, that kind of feeling that runs through the whole Planet of the Apes franchise, and that continues on here. You know, it's not like your typical Hollywood blockbuster where every character lives, everybody gets out of every situation, no matter how ridiculous it is. You know, there are moments throughout this where certain characters get into some sticky situations. You think, how are they going to make it out of this? And they don't. And it just feels much more realistic to me, and it makes you feel for the characters more, because you know there's real risks, there's real stakes, anything could happen. And that's something that I do really appreciate about the Apes films. They are quite dark, and they're not afraid to go to certain places that I don't think other blockbusters of this kind would go. One of the things that does hold this back for me is, unfortunately, they weren't able to create a new character anywhere near as interesting or engaging as Caesar. And obviously that was always going to be a really difficult feat. I just think Caesar is one of the best written characters ever, and just how much heart and soul Andy Serkis brought to that performance. He was absolutely amazing, created this very memorable character, brought out so much emotion in us watching his story arc, and yeah, just extremely memorable. And I think if they created a character here half as interesting as Caesar, they would have succeeded. But unfortunately, I don't think they've managed to do that. I think Noah's definitely likeable. You know, it's kind of interesting that he looks just like a young version of Caesar, and that's where the similarities end. He is likeable, but he does not have his words and his presence don't hold anywhere near the weight that Caesar does. So he's not as memorable, he's not as interesting to follow, and that is something that holds it back. And I think that's probably one of the things that makes that past trilogy so special, was because of how good of a character Caesar was. Maybe without him it wouldn't have worked as well, but that's something I definitely noticed missing from this one, was his presence here. And that goes for some of the other characters as well. Like, whilst I did like the villain, actually, I do think the villain is well acted, quite interesting, but it's mainly the other apes around Noah, you know, from the community. I couldn't really tell you now anything specific about any of them. They kind of appear in certain scenes. You see a bit of Noah's connection with them, but you don't really get that feeling or that sense that you really know them at all. And that's a bit of a problem for me, because, you know, the characters in these apes and the dynamic between them is something that makes the story so engaging, and I just don't think they really nailed it here at all compared to that trilogy. And the one other issue I had was with a bit of the plotting here. Now, this might be something that's wrapped up in my mind on a second viewing in case there were a couple of details that I missed, but it's around the character of May. And obviously when she ends up, you know, as she's a scavenger, she first meets this group, she tags along with Noah, and they go on this journey which eventually leads them to the kingdom. And it's, you know, obviously where her plot goes, she wanted to go there all along. So I don't understand whether she knew that Noah was going to end up there, whether she set up a series of events earlier on that would lead her to be in this position where she could go there. None of this was entirely clear to me. I'm really interested to know in the comments if any of you have any theories around that. It wasn't something that struck me as I was watching it. Like, the way it plays out feels quite natural. It's only in hindsight, when you look back and you discuss it with people, you think, hang on, how did that work? How did she know all of these things were going to fall into place so that she could knowingly go to this location? So that's a little bit of a question mark in my mind. But again, as I say, that might be something that is cleared up for me with another viewing. So that is all of my thoughts on the Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. Please do let me know all of your thoughts down in the comments section. Please also consider subscribing to my channel if you've been enjoying my content. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.